It had to be the most embarrassing Christmas morning ever. I mean, mortified were my teenage girls because the two of them had spent the last several months fighting over the same thing. Those are mine, no, mine, no, mine, no, mine. Fighting and squabbling and arguing, bickering, knockdown, drag out, screaming and crying, makeup everywhere kind of fights. For weeks, months on end. Over thongs. Yes, that's what I bought them for Christmas. I bought them both several pairs of underwear so they would stop fighting over each other's underwear. Apparently, when young teenage girls have these fancy little panties, they are all very much alike. And so I bought as many distinct, unique pairs as possible and encouraged them to write their names in them, which I'm sure they didn't do because that's something teenage boys do when they go off to summer camp. But they were mortified that Dad would get involved in such a bizarre squabble. How they expected it to be solved otherwise, I don't know. I do know that I didn't want the fighting in the house anymore. I didn't want the stress and the striving over their arguments causing bad blood. And to me, the only solution was to provide them both with what they believed they wanted in order that the arguments would stop. Now, truth be told, I don't think that was all of the argument. It was a good surface argument. It was a good thing to say, this is what we're fighting about, but there was probably tension because they both see themselves as firstborn because there's a 5-year difference between them. So they're both firstborn. They're both very intelligent, headstrong young women. I don't know where they get that. But their willingness to fight for their own position was very evident. What they were fighting over was probably less realistic than simply the right to claim their own ground, the desire to say, this is my space, this is my stuff, it's mine, and it should stay mine, and it's not yours, so leave it alone. And I think we see that in our culture and in our society. And one of the challenges that we have as leaders at any level is that we often have leaders above us who manipulate that reality. They use the desire to claim a ground, to stake a possession, to say that's mine and you can't have it, which is a natural human desire. They use that desire to pit one group of people against another. To say we own this idea, we own this notion, we own this success. You own that defeat. We own this righteousness and you own that fault. The challenge that we see as leaders is that our job is to unify. The job of the leader is to allow just enough discontent for people to realize you can't stay the same. Change is inevitable. But the question is, have we established a strong enough vision for what that change will look like so that the changed position, the end vision, the destined goal is more desirable than the current position? I think we see the challenge even in just our recent presidential elections, that there's a lot of ambiguity in the plan. There's a lot of what has been taken as a single phrase or two and exploded into mean all kinds of things that it may or may not mean. And we won't know whether it does or doesn't mean what it's been expressed to mean until the time has come that the plan is put into action and the results of the action are seen. An ambiguous statement like, it's going to be great, it could mean it's going to be broccoli. And how many people love broccoli? Raise your hands. Or it could mean it's going to be Brussels sprouts, because the person saying it owns the subjectivity of what great means. We don't know what great means. To me, great would be peanut butter and jelly instead of broccoli. To me, great might be liver and onions where you prefer fried chicken. To me, great may be pumpkin pie, but you prefer pecan pie. That doesn't mean that it won't be great, but being great is subjective. When we look at what's happening in our culture right now, there's a lot of temper tantrums that are about equivalent to fighting over someone else's underwear. They're foolishness. They're silly. We're getting all blown out of proportion with arguments and accusations because leadership at every level has not declared a vision that everyone can get behind, a unifying vision that says this is where we're going, this is what we're going to accomplish, that includes everyone. Now, I do realize that over the last probably 15 or 20 years, we have seen a difference in our country. I recognized when I voted in the elections of 2000 that this is not my grandpa's country anymore. A lot of the things that I cherished as a young boy, they're just not there anymore. But I also notice as time goes on that the current state of affairs in our country is not a sustainable path. We're going to have to make some changes in order to keep going, in order to find another 240 years of American history. But the temper tantrums and the arguments that are caused by the smallest of things is a leadership problem. And it's a leadership problem all the way down to the home. If we don't find the quality of leadership in our parents, in our student peers, in our football coaches, in our basketball coaches, and our volleyball coaches, that allow us to become human beings who are grown-ups, who honestly own our own mistakes and recognize that others are going to make them too. See, a large challenge, and I've mentored in a high school in Dallas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for about 5 years. And I listened to it in the conversation of these high school students, sophomores to seniors. I have a student still in high school. And I understand how the bickering starts, how the silliness starts, how the arguments start. I also understand that sometimes that's all about feelings. It's not about logic. It's not about practicality. It's not about looking down the road and going, well, what will be the long term if I stay on this course? It's about how do I feel right now? How do I get my way? Which is the norm when you have toddlers. I have a grandson who's not quite 2. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he bucks his back, he screams and yells, he might throw cat food at you. He's going to do whatever he wants to do until you give him what he wants. When he's 2 and 3, that's the time to discipline that behavior out of him. That's the time to let him consequence. If he wants to throw cat food, he's going to have to pick the cat food up. That's not my job. If he wants to throw a temper tantrum, he can sit in his room until he's done throwing a temper tantrum. There's a way that we discipline that type of behavior out of toddlers. But when that behavior exists at 10 years old, at 12 years old, at 18 years old, at 22 years old, you end up with another Ethan Couch who feels like it's his right to take the life of half a dozen people and then flee the country to not face justice because, well, my parents were wealthy and I didn't understand. No, sir, you simply weren't raised right. Sorry, I'm a bit on a soapbox. But I think that we're seeing the backlash in our country, the behavior of our millennials, the behavior of our high school and college students. Some of them not even old enough to vote, but they're out there protesting. Some of them who voted in their very first election. My friends, we have to understand as leaders, as parents, that many of the young people who voted in this election have only known the world as we see it today. The political climate, the divisiveness, the racism, the arguments. They haven't reached this level in years, but they've been spurred by some of the comments. Van Jones is a perfect example, who said this is a white lash. Another commenter, I believe it was Rachel Maddow, said this is a statement that we're not ready for a female president. Okay, both of those are inaccurate. As a white male voter, in fact, as the most typified of all of the Trump voters, a white male, uncollege-educated voter, I would have just as quickly voted for Condoleezza Rice or Alan West or Carly Fiorina as I did for Donald Trump. Not voting for Hillary Clinton had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with gender. It had nothing to do with any of that. It had everything to do with qualifications, truthfulness, and a shared vision. And I don't share the vision for the United States of America that Hillary Clinton espouses. What she sees as our future frightens me. Honestly, what I see in Donald Trump's declaration of what our future will be is ambiguous at best. I, I don't see exactly what he has in mind, but there are a couple of statements that he made that I firmly agree with. The sanctity of life, the greatness of America, and the hope of our future generations to restore our constitutional values to what they were. Our current president, by his own words, see our Constitution as a living document that needs to be changed. I don't believe that. I have not heard any argument strong enough to understand why our Constitution, which has lasted longer than any other form of government on the face of the earth, successfully. Communism seems to be a goal that they're moving toward. That's fine. It hasn't worked anywhere else at any other time in history. It hasn't successfully been a form of government. Now, do I disagree with everything that Hillary Clinton might have to say? No, probably not. Do I agree with everything that Donald Trump might have to say? No, probably not. But I learned as a toddler that throwing a temper tantrum doesn't change either one of those things. It's my right to vote. It's my opportunity to explain my views and share them with others in hopes that they will agree with my opinions and vote in the same direction. But once that vote is cast, it's a done deal. I did not riot in the streets when President Obama won. I was disappointed. It's not the future vision for my country that I wanted. Again, it's not about racism. I would have rather elected Ben Carson or Alan West than Barack Obama. Yes, they're both dark-skinned African-American men. I would have elected either one of them, or even Dr. Jeffrey Mitchell, before I would have elected President Obama. But he's in office. He is our president, and I would respect him, and as a soldier, I would have laid down my life for him and not thought twice about it, because he is the authority over me, and God appoints that authority. If my vote didn't sway that future, then I trust God has a plan with it. The temper tantrums that we're seeing now because people didn't get their way go back to the fact that we have young people who've been raised without the discipline to understand that you will not always get your way. And there's going to be a time in life when that's going to become a personal crisis for them that may land them in jail or fleeing to another country like Ethan Couch because their parents have not been leaders. Now, I know it sounds like I got on a political soapbox. I'm using our current events to illustrate to you a point. In Proverbs chapter 15, there are some really simple instructions that we're given as individuals in coping with our own conversations, as parents in coping with the conversations of our teenagers and our young people, all the way up as long as we have influence over them or with them, and in leadership, principles that we have to apply in basic leadership. He says, a gentle response diffuses anger, but a sharp tongue kindles a temper fire. A sharp tongue kindles a temper fire. You know, there's a very fine line between saying the right thing and saying the wrong thing. But the line that's easier to draw is saying no thing. It's often easier to say nothing and let the future meet itself out. Those details are going to come out in the wash, so to speak. In fact, it comes a little later on. We'll talk about that. Knowledge flows like a spring water from the wise, but fools are leaky faucets dripping nonsense. There are many people who make decisions purely based on their own feelings. And when I say their own feelings, I mean they're in an encapsulated shell. They have no regard for the long-term impact on anybody else. They have no logical application of any other facts, either history or future. They look only at how does this make me feel, and they make all their decisions based on that. That's a fool's errand. Scripture tells us over and over, the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things, and no man can know it. If you make decisions in this life based purely on your feelings, you are going to have a miserable, horribly miserable life. Your feelings are ignorant. And by that I mean your feelings are not attached to fact. That takes great discipline of the mind. The soul is 3 parts, mind, will, and emotions. But when your emotions are in control of everything, neither your mind nor your will are any good. If your will is completely in charge of everything, then you're living in pride and you haven't thought it through and you have no regard for how that feels for anybody else. And if you're purely intellectual, you may have all the right answers, but the way you treat everybody else is horrible. Those 3 have to come into balance, the mind, the will, and the emotion. And then they have to be surrendered to the Spirit of God. so that when the Spirit of God speaks to you, you do, you feel, you act the way he says. You think like Christ, you act like Christ, you feel like Christ. When that hasn't happened in your life, making decisions based on your emotions is a train wreck coming. It's a guarantee. It's a train wreck coming. Can you imagine if every toddler who didn't get his way because he wanted a toy that belonged to somebody else, if every toddler grew up to be a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old with influence in life, or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old running a company, and still had the same attitude that everything in the world is mine and I'll take it from you to get it, and I'll hurt you to get it? We would be a world run by emotional bullies, physical bullies, financial bullies, and there would be no sense of justice at any level. But when we equate justice of criminality with justice of opportunity and justice of results, we have a major problem. Everyone in America has an equal opportunity. Sometimes that opportunity looks different based on our class, our education, our relationships. No one owes us opportunity, but we have equal access to that opportunity. What we don't get often is equal results. When I go run in the morning, I don't often look down and see a 6-minute mile. Well, isn't there something in life that guarantees that I should have a 6-minute mile every time? No, that's totally dependent on my effort. I have the opportunity to run. I have the wherewithal to run around the block. That makes me different maybe than someone who's a war veteran who has no legs. But because I have the opportunity to run, the results are not guaranteed to me. That's about my effort. It's about my willingness to run on a regular basis, to train my body, to make it submit. That's on me. That's not on anybody else. And yet the childish, the foolish, the emotionally driven, who decide everything based on how they feel, seem to do that in not only a limited scope of personhood, but a limited scope of time. And that temper tantrum causes major problems. In fact, it says they're dripping nonsense. Fools like a leaky faucet, dripping nonsense. It's all about how I feel, and I'm just going to leave my feelers all over everybody else. And so we're all kind of stuck in that muck and mire of emotion with no rationality, with no long-term consequences taken into thought. God doesn't miss a thing. He's alert to good and evil alike. If, and it's not my opinion, but it is altogether possible, my opinion has been wrong before. If Donald Trump is the worst thing to happen to America since the founding fathers landed on this soil, then God Almighty knows it. He knows what you had for breakfast tomorrow. And he already knows what your wedding day is going to look like if you're 10. And he already knows the day you're going to die and where you'll be and how it'll happen. God knows the beginning from the end. And God knows evil from good. He doesn't miss a thing. He's alert. 2 Peter 3:9 says, don't count God as slow. It's not that he doesn't care. It's just that he's patient because he's not willing for any to perish. He wants everyone to come to a knowledge of him. That's a challenging thought for some of us because we don't get our immediate feelings met. We don't get from God what we want right now. But God, I didn't get my way, and we scream and we yell and we throw a temper tantrum. But the reality is God has a long-range plan. I mean, it's been 7,000 years already. That's a pretty long-range plan. If you thought about all the things that had to fall into place for God to do what God is already doing just in your life, he's got a long-range plan, and he's aware of all of the good and all of the evil and everything that's gone wrong in your life. Jeremiah 29 talks about all the plans that he has, what he intends to do in your life. Go back and read that. You'll understand that he knows the results of the outcome, whether it's Mike Pence or Donald Trump or it's Tim Kaine or it's Hillary Clinton or had it been Ben Carson or Bernie Sanders. God knows what the results would be 2 years, 4 years, 25, 55, 75, 105 years. When we're long gone, God knows now what the result of that political campaign and that political season would have been. For us to fret and to fight and throw a temper tantrum over the outcome, over those results, is silly. It's not impacting anything. There is another political season coming. Get busy. If you disagree with where it is now, get busy now. Change things now. But throwing a temper tantrum is not the way to change things. Changing leadership in your home, raising your children to see the world in a different way, allowing people to grow up. That's how we change things. We've got to lead from the very beginning. Kind words heal and help. Cutting words wound and maim. Moral dropouts won't listen to their elders. Welcoming correction is a mark of good sense. The lives of God-loyal people flourish. A misspent life is soon bankrupt. Perceptive words spread knowledge. Fools are hollow. There's nothing in them. Now, we've just talked about 5 or 6 verses out of Proverbs chapter 15. You can go over to 14 and see things like, it's criminal to ignore a neighbor in need, but compassion for the poor, what a blessing. Isn't it obvious that conspirators lose out while the thoughtful win love and trust? Hard work always pays off. Mere talk puts no bread on the table. The wise accumulate wisdom. Fools get stupider by the day. Saved are the souls by truthful witness, and betrayed by the spread of lies. The fear of God builds up confidence and makes a world safe for your children. We could spend hours on that one phrase. I don't know if you know this or not, but the book of Proverbs was written by the man who, by all accounts, was the wealthiest person ever to live and the wisest person ever to live, King Solomon. King Solomon said, the fear of God builds up confidence and makes a world safe for your children. People who are throwing a temper tantrum because the election didn't give them what they wanted. People who are throwing a temper tantrum because they don't see their free college or their free handouts or a socialist government that they believe they want, don't have a fear of God. Many of them. I'm not going to say all of them. But a fear of God is the beginning of strong confidence. I fear God in the way of knowing that in the blink of an eye, in the snap of his finger, in one word uttered from his mouth, this world would be over. And he has the right to do it. As creator of the universe, he can as easily undo everything he's done as he did to make it in the first place. He's not willing that any should perish. He wants all to come to a knowledge of him. But he has the right to snatch it away in a moment's notice, to end what we know as life and not bat an eye. And so long as we are unwilling to acknowledge that, we will fret about what's going on today. We will fuss about what we've accomplished or achieved or gathered or gained or been given. It's when we step back and go, God, the universe is yours. The thousand cattle on the hills are yours. The money in my bank account is yours. The time that I have on this earth to live and breathe and have my own being is yours. When we are willing to acknowledge that, petty things like a national election fall to the wayside. Did you hear me say that? I want you to grasp that. Step back for a moment. We have a nation right now that is in emotional turmoil, throwing a temper tantrum over the smallest broken toy. By comparison to a world that is dying and headed for eternal hell. And the reason we're capable of fighting about the small petty stuff is because we've been told, look over there, no look over there, no look over there. Take some time if you haven't seen it yet and go see, can you see me now? Understand that there are two aspects at play that we're seeing played out in the psychology of our politics right now. The neuro-linguistic programming that goes along with don't watch the glass. Whatever you do, don't watch the glass. Don't look at the glass. Don't listen to the sound of the glass on the table. You cannot hear the glass. The glass is not there. The glass is not there. There is no glass. There's no water in that glass. It will not spill on you. There's no water in the glass. Meanwhile, there's someone coming from this side to stab you in the back of the head. A total distraction. Telling you what to believe and what not to believe. What to see and what not to see. That is the mastery of sleight of hand. It is the mastery of NLP. I shared a video right here on my Facebook page not too long ago. And in that video, a master illusionist comes onto a talk show. And he just has people draw a picture, and then he's able to implant in them the idea of what he wants them to draw. If you haven't seen that, scroll down on my Facebook profile page until you find it. It just says NLP in write mode. Let me help you understand. Politicians and political experts have deeply studied the psychology of the human mind. They know what words will trip emotional triggers in your life. They know what to say, when to say it, and how to get you to react. They also know the long game. If I hit the ball this way first, because it's a dog leg, so I want to hit it to the angle and then shoot back across rather than getting caught in the hook. I can shoot long here and long there and have a shorter putting game, right? That strategy has already been thought through in every political season and every political campaign. You do get people like Donald Trump who threw a monkey wrench in the whole thing because he had no long-range political plan. He just spoke from the hip. He was a wild cannon in a lot of aspects. A lot of what he had to say, no one predicted and no one expected. It was completely different. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a supreme negotiator. Because if you look back over his track record, he does tend to get what he wants. Good, bad, or otherwise. But this form of sleight of hand, psychological, verbal, audible manipulation, when we don't fear God and have confidence in him, we get caught up in the small details. We could spend hours looking at the glass and trying to figure out how we see water in it, but it's not really there. We could even become convinced that there's not water in there until it spills on us. And we pay the price for being so focused on this one little thing that the rest of the world burns down around us. God is aware of everything, every truth and every lie that's been told in this political season. God is aware of every good and evil act. God is aware of every good and evil intention. God is aware and ultimately in control. While he allows the human will to make decisions on its own and take actions on its own, he has not given up his sovereign control. Remember, when Pharaoh hardened his heart and wouldn't let the people of Egypt go, the word says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Story after story in Scripture, we see wicked men used to bring about God's purpose. Story after story, we see evil brought to judgment by an almighty God. The fear of God brings confidence for the safe future of our children. We need to stop worrying about the fear in the streets. We need to stop worrying about the emotions that drive us. We need to stop making decisions based on temporal, emotional decisions. We need to zoom out and realize that God's sole purpose is to save souls from eternal hell. That's it. All of the other things that we see, that we feel, that we do, we're driving to work, our temper tantrums in traffic, our disagreements with our spouse, our disappointments with our educational goals or our career goals. Temporary, meaningless, pointless. It doesn't mean that God's not concerned about them, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like arguing about how much water is in the glass. I hope today has been a challenge for you to really dig into the deep things of what God is calling you to do as leaders and influencers. Our role is to understand that while we're here, Matthew 28:19 through 20 says all authority on heaven and in heaven and on earth have been given to me, and I give it now to you. Go ye therefore and preach the gospel and make disciples. God didn't give us power and authority just to run countries. While for some people that is their mandate. God did not give us power and authority just to make money. While for some people that is their mandate. But for all of us, he gave us power and authority to preach the gospel to save souls from hell. That's the purpose of mankind, to fear God and obey his commands. I want you to take to heart the reality that we can't live in the microcosms of the day and fulfill the purposes of our long-range plan and why our Father put us here. We've got to zoom out and get a hold of the vision that God has given us as children of God and realize that our job as leaders in the body of Christ is to influence the world to know Jesus, to be filled with his Spirit, to learn to hear his voice, and to do and to say what he does and what he says, to live according to his will, empowered by his Spirit. That's why we're here. Anything short of that is an exercise in futility. I love you, and I really believe that our country can be strong again. I do believe that when we can see a vision for why we're here that's greater than, do I get free college or do I not get free college? When we can zoom out and see the needs of this world and how America has been for over 200 years perfectly positioned to meet those needs, we can get back to the business of healing this world and healing this country and bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to a dying and hurting world. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.